Tanares is this sprawling IP that started with a very successful board game series. The most recent iteration of the board game was this massive all-in deluxe multi-box set on Kickstarter that raised $1.6 million and millions more in pre-orders and sales. Well, the company Dragora Games decided to spin off a tabletop RPG based on that high fantasy setting of Tanares, and that Kickstarter itself raised $2.1 million. The RPG uses the D&D 5e rule set, and right off the bat, I think we have to thank Wizards of the Coast for the third-party license that allows creators like Dragora Games to use their rule set. Now, we all know that they tried to claw that back in 2023 and then awkwardly lied about trying to do that, and then ultimately released the rules under a maximally generous Creative Commons license. But the original open gaming license for D&D 5e was what Dragora Games was working with at the time that they created and published Tanares RPG. And we do have WotC to thank for that rules baseline. That being said, Tanares sort of beats Wizards of the Coast at their own game. In this video, I want to quickly run through the main reasons why I think that the Tanares RPG is just fundamentally a better game than WotC's officially published 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Also, please be sure to leave your comments down below, and I've left links to where you can get this game for yourself, as well as sign up for my newsletter and Patreon. Reason number 1, the Tanares books are built to last. Unlike WotC's Dungeons & Dragons books, the books that comprise the core of this game come in a slipcase by default and are built to last. By the way, check out that lenticular effect with the dragon eye there. Nice. Inside the slipcase is some art. It's like a treasure-laden alcove of some sort. There's also a GM screen that has most of what you'll need when running a game. The artwork on the front is pretty nice, maybe a little dark and bland in some spots. And there is also this huge double-sided map. On one side is a capital city with no readily apparent name, and on the other side is the continental map that shows you the part of the world that the core Tanares setting book is concerned with. But yeah, to the first point here, the Tanares books themselves are just well constructed. They are stitch bound as opposed to glue bound, and that's just going to last you an order of magnitude longer. I'm sure Wizards of the Coast could afford to have their rulebooks printed with the better binding, but remember, they owe it to Hasbro's shareholders to make something as cheaply as possible and sell it at the highest price that the market can bear. 2. More focused high fantasy setting. Tanares is a high fantasy setting with some pretty deep lore, extensive written history, and complex politics. Unlike traditional D&D 5e's good versus evil approach, Tanares presents a world driven by factions like the Tanarian Empire, which seeks to increase control and protection against the ungods, and the forces of Darkal, who want to turn the world into an eternal winter, but for the sake of preventing corruption. And the Malkorian curse prohibits large-scale warfare, meaning disputes are settled in arenas, and the fact that heroes play a crucial role in shaping the world's future actually makes sense. People can't fight wars, so their differences have to be settled through acts of individuals. This creates a more personal, hero-driven experience compared to 5e's typically much more sprawling and desultory settings. 3. Lore-relevant classes. The 4 additional classes that Tanares introduces are pretty interesting. The Dragonblade, Elementalist, Madwalker, and Redeemer all have unique mechanics, obviously, but the key here is that their abilities are deeply tied to the game's lore. Each class feels purposefully integrated into the setting, unlike the more generic approach found in Vanilla 5e. And by the way, each of these classes comes with about 20 pages each of features, spells, and abilities. Each one is pretty much completely unique. 4. Player versus player combat. Tanares introduces a structured PvP arena system that encourages player versus player combat as a natural part of the world. Because remember, due to the Malkorian curse, which forbids large-scale warfare, disputes in the society are settled through arena battles, making PvP integral to the story rather than just an afterthought. This is in stark contrast to WotC's D&D 5e, which rarely offers direct support for PvP and often relies on homebrew rules or GM decisions. In Tanares, PvP is not only supported, but woven into the setting itself, allowing players to personally resolve faction rivalries and disputes in a lore-appropriate way. 5. The magic system. In Tanares, magic is intricately tied to the world's lore. The constant threat of the penumbral plane and the ungods means that spellcasters operate in a world where their magic could have dire consequences, adding a layer of danger and intrigue to every cast. Compared to the default 5e's magic system, which is robust, but often feels disconnected from the world's narrative, Tanares ensures that magic is a core part of the setting, influencing both player decisions and world events. 6. Integrated new species. Tanares offers 4 species that are intricately tied to the setting and history of the world they're in. The Cirrus are angelic winged beings dedicated to the chivalric code, blending arcane and divine powers to protect the world from the ungods, primarily residing in the northern mountains and serving as elite guardians of the realm. Gloomfolk, once winter elves, were twisted by the cult of Shadow Wing into half-elven, half-scorpion beings, and now live in the shadows of Tanares' underground realms, driven by vengeance against those who transmogrified them. The Soulborn are reincarnated beings with fragmented memories of past lives, scattered across Tanares as diplomats, traders, and scholars, eternally seeking relics from their previous existence to recover lost knowledge and identity. The Taimaku are rational, stoic engineers who reside in mobile cities powered by arcane energy, striving to advance Tanares through a fusion of logic, technology, and magic, while remaining emotionally detached from the world's conflicts. Each of these species has distinct abilities and lore that are just tied to the world, making them feel like an organic part of the setting rather than just mechanical options. Even classic species like the elves, dwarves, and orcs are given fresh interpretations, with new cultural nuances and societal structures that set them apart from their vanilla 5e counterparts. Faction-driven stories. Tanares is fueled by a complex political landscape with multiple major factions competing for control. Each of these factions have distinct goals and motivations, adding depth to the world's power struggles, unlike in WotC's 5e settings where political systems can feel a bit simplistic and underdeveloped. Every action your hero takes has the potential to shift the balance of power, making their role crucial to the broader political scene. 8. Setting-focused subclasses. Tanares provides new subclass options for all of the original 5e classes that get PCs even more integrated into the setting. For example, the clerics who serve deities like Baka, the spirit god of magic, or Tamara, the goddess of life, take on roles that align with the ongoing struggles against the ungods and the political strife between factions, struggles that are core to the entire setting. By contrast, 5e's subclass options often feel super generic with no narrative weight. 9. The Adventures Book. The Adventures in the Realm of Madness supplement provides a flexible campaign for GMs and players, offering more freedom and depth than typical WotC 5e modules. The book details one adventure, but it's structured to give GMs multiple plot hooks, from combat-focused to investigation-driven, allowing them to adapt the story based on the party's preferences and playstyle. This flexibility gives GMs more control over the tone and direction of the campaign, compared to the often painfully linear design of official 5e adventures. 10. Campaign Sourcebook. The Campaign Sourcebook serves as a one-stop shop for all the remaining details you need to understand the setting. The big takeaway from this setting book is how it uses a lot of familiar high fantasy concepts, but in a fresh, reimagined way. For example, the penumbral dragons are not just dragons, but manifestations of the eldritch corruption caused by the ungods, with their presence tied to the creeping influence of this dark dimension called the penumbral plane. These dragons embody cosmic horror, and they reflect a whole other parallel world that your players will have to contend with. There are dozens of examples of not just reimagined fantasy concepts in the sourcebook, but completely original creatures for players to kill or get killed by as well. All of it is just a breath of fresh air after being buried by WotC's corporate-made D&D 5e schlock for years and years. I guess in the end, it mostly comes down to having characters, abilities, factions, and monsters all really closely tied to one central setting, rather than the one-size-fits-all elements that WotC gives you for their kitchen sink setting, Forgotten Realms. Maybe to distill it further, the Tanares RPG gives you a world, first and foremost, and then everything inside it follows that world. WotC's 5e gives you superheroes first and foremost, and then nothing else seems to matter. The Tanares approach makes a lot more sense to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Tanares RPG and if you've been able to bring it to your table. I've left links for everything down below. Thanks for watching. See ya.